Hi, Jim Roddy here from the RSPA, jumping in before today's pod to remind everybody registration is now open for Retail Now 2024, the Retail Technology Channel's #1 trade show, education conference, and networking event. Join RSPA and Retail IT channel leaders live and in person July 28th through the 30th, back on the Strip in Las Vegas at the Paris Hotel. With nearly 200 exhibitors, Retail Now is one-stop shopping for VARs and ISVs. And with an expected 1,600 or more attendees, it's the place for extreme industry connectivity. Across just 48 hours, you'll meet new partners and new solution providers who can accelerate the success of your business. If you're serious about the Retail IT channel, you have to attend Retail Now 2024, again, July 28th through the 30th in Las Vegas. Retail Now is where the industry meets. For all the details, visit the Retail Now website at gorspa.org/retail now. Again, that's gorspa.org/retail now. We hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, frequent listeners and viewers of our podcast know our plan for 2024 has been to talk with leaders from both within the RSPA member community and outside the community about their leadership journeys and what they've learned along the way. And this is one of those ventures outside of our industry with two leaders who've achieved great success in an area that I'm passionate about: college athletics. I've learned firsthand as a former player that there's many lessons that can be learned from the sports world that can be applied to business leadership. Our first guest is Brian Streeter, the Director of Athletics for the past 27 years at Penn State-Behrend, a Division III college in my hometown of Erie, Pennsylvania. Under Brian's leadership, Behrend has earned 23 of the past 24 President's Cups for the Allegheny Mountain Collegiate Conference that's presented to the most accomplished athletic program in conference competition. Prior to joining Behrend, he spent 14 years as an Assistant Athletics Director and Head Coach at men's basketball at Hobart College in New York, and 3 years ago, he was inducted into the Erie Sports Hall of Fame. Brian, great to be talking with you again. Welcome to the Trusted Advisor.
Jim, great to be on with you. Thank you.
Sure, happy to have you as a guest. Now, despite all of Brian's accomplishments, one thing he's never done at Behrend is hire a men's basketball coach, right? A head coach. That's because our second guest is Coach Dave Niland. He's led the Lions for 29 years, 28 of them winning seasons. He's the school's all-time leader in men's basketball coaching victories with 576. He's been named Conference Coach of the Year 7 times, and he's also an Erie Sports Hall of Fame inductee. He played college basketball for legendary coach John Beilein at Division II Lemoyne and Syracuse. That's where our paths first crossed, where I played for Gannon, who was a rival of Lemoyne. And that was before Coach Beilein became a legend at West Virginia and the University of Michigan. Coach Niland, always a pleasure to talk with you.
Great to be here, Jim.
I miss bumping into you on the courts, and then also we would do the 7:30 a.m. mass at St. Jude's on West 6th Street there. So
yes, we did.
Yeah, and also to show folks evidence, those watching on our YouTube channel, I've got my old sports magazine, and I've got Coach Niland here from 1997 when he was just a few years into the job there. So getting your feet wet at that point, and obviously there's a lot that you guys have accomplished then. So it's so great to be reconnecting with you guys. So I have to start by asking you both about that longevity that we talked about when we gave your bios. So what a lot of folks have heard lately about college athletics, right, is the transactional natures. Players sometimes going to 5 different schools in 5 years, coaches jumping all over the place. I want to know from both of you, what is the key to your longevity as a successful leader? And Brian, can you talk about that for you both personally and also for your staff, right? Your staff has almost everybody's been with the school 10 years. And in fact, Coach Niland isn't your longest tenured coach. Dan Paritano's been coached in there, and also Paul Benham, your soccer and baseball coaches for over 30 years. Talk about what's the key to that longevity.
I think opportunity. They've been able to grow programs. We try to give them support. As an institution, we try to be supportive of our coaches, and that allows them to build a program. And I think the coaches that we have here understand that, yeah, they all could move on. Coach Nyland's had opportunities to go places, but you're building your own community. You're building your own family. And their programs are that way. Baseball, Paul's been here 32 years and done just that. Has a family of baseball folks that support the game, both parents, alumni. And that's important. I think you see in transactions happening across the board, right? Colleges, coaches come and go, players come and go. There's no continuity. I mean, we grew up in an age that we used to watch an NBA team and you knew the players. You knew the players every day. You knew the football players all the time. Same in college. You knew the college players. Now you don't have it. And I think we see that with Krzyzewski and some of these older coaches getting out of the business of late. They're out because they don't want to be out in this NIL business where kids are coming and going and got to be paid for everything. And the nice thing in Division III, we don't have that. Our kids that come here want to get a great education. So fortunately, our coaches have a great education they can afford and share with kids. And they have a great basketball program, soccer program. All our programs are that way. You're right, Jim. We've been fortunate. Right now we're running 22 programs. And of all our programs, I think I've got two part-time coaches. The rest are full-time. And of the full-time coaches, only my wrestling coach is the newest coach I have. That's because we changed that 2 years ago. Otherwise, these coaches have been here 16, 12, 15, 18, 24 years. Again, good people. For me, I'm here because I like the people I work with. Bottom line.
And when you say the support, can you break that down a little bit more? Because I'm guessing it's not just go get them, we're here for you. Like, what makes your support that you're providing to your coaches different from maybe what a lot of other schools are doing? Can you break down support for us?
I think we've been fortunate up in the years to always have enough athletic trainers to provide our coaches. This year, training situation now across the country is difficult. We've got to find trainers, and we're just like everybody else. We're searching. But prior to that, we had 4 athletic trainers on staff. We had a healthy SID staff. We had good support staff from the equipment room. We had good facilities. Our facilities have improved over the years. Jim, back 20 some years ago, we just had Old Erie Hall. That's all we had. Now we've got the Junker Center. Now we've got Erie Hall has been rebuilt. There's 3 more basketball courts in Erie Hall. So facilities-wise have gotten better. Are we still at the level we'd want to be at? We'd like to be like some of the privates. We do the best we can. With what we have, though, we've shown continued improvement. We've tried to be supportive of our coaches. Coach Niland's made some European trips. We've been supportive of the European trips. We haven't said no to them. They want to do something. We find a way to make it happen. I think that's what you're supposed to do. In the Division III world, you definitely want to be there to support your coaches and your athletes and give them. If I support Dave and his athletes, they're going to support Coach Niland later. And that's happened.
And my guess is the communication is a key to that. You don't know what the coach wants unless you have open dialogue with them.
Gotta listen.
Accurate?
Yeah. You got to be able to listen to what your coaches are saying. Sometimes I'm quick to the point. Sometimes I listen, but I don't hear. Sometimes you got to slow down and listen to them. It's really important. And you got to trust your coaches. Coach Niland's come to me many times when I'm going to lose my top and it's like, Coach, you got to calm down. Don't do it. Don't do it. And that's what it takes. You got people you got to trust. If Dave says something to me, I take what he says to heart and says, okay, probably right. I need to not blow up here. Just be patient, step back. And you need to have people that aren't afraid to come say something to you. And I don't take it personally. I'm just like, okay, they're looking out for me. Just like I'm going to look out for our coaches. If I thought coach was going to lose it in a ball game to an official, I'd say something to him. I've never had to worry about that.
Yeah.
Some of our coaches, we got to keep an eye on them, but Coach Niland's always been a true professional. And that's what you're working with. You're working with true professionals. Yeah. So you know how to handle them the right way. And they make you, I'm me because of my coaches. They made me a better administrator. I love coaching. God, I keep telling people when I stop this job, I'm going to go back into coaching somewhere.
Yeah.
I love it. I miss the coaching. I miss the colleagues that I used to work with. I miss the recruiting. I think the recruiting is a knack that you have to love to do and enjoy it. But right now I got our coaches. They're the best thing for me and they keep me going.
Yeah, communication and professionalism. I won't name the school or the people involved, but there's a legendary story about an athletic director fired his women's basketball coach the day before the AD went on vacation, and he put the note like "you're fired" into his mailbox and then took off. And then the coach got him. He's like, "I need to talk to so and so." And they're like, "Sorry, he's gone for a week." And this is before cell phones and all that. So yeah, professionalism and communication. So Coach Niland, can you talk about how have you sustained your success as a leader for an extended period of time when there is natural turnover in your team, right? You can't sign kids to 10-year contracts. The 4 years is the most that you have with a kid. How have you managed to sustain that success?
I think, Jim, the biggest thing is it's a team effort. Like most things, whether it's a business or an athletic department, it's a team effort, and it starts with Brian. He's provided tremendous support, very good administration. We've only had, I think, 4 chancellors, Brian, in the last 30 years. That's key. If you have a lot of turnover in any business or educational setting, the success isn't there. So Brian's support, and that he's coached. It's a huge thing. He's like the last of ADs really that have coached, and he can really relate to what you need, when you need it, what you don't need. He's really good that way, and having that experience of being in the chair helps a lot. And you have to be adaptable. He started coaching, long before some of our younger coaches. The internet, same thing. That just different stuff. Having the right people with you, from a standpoint, sustaining success is only related to how many good players you have, but they have to be good people. And we want to really understand: can we develop those people? Can we develop talent within our organization? I always say, can we lose with you? Can we have a tough day with you? Whether you're an employee or an athlete, can we have a tough day with you? Can I ride that bus with you when things aren't going great? And then, personally, just staying on top of trends, studying the game. I'm the more I coach, the less I think I know. And so I'm infatuated with the game, and you have to stay on top of it daily, watch film daily, recruit daily, and recruit the right people.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I'm curious if you can expand a little bit upon, you said, can we lose with you? Can we have you on a tough day? How do you find out if somebody fits the bill for that? And I guess the one thing I can say is there's never, Behrend has won, but it hasn't been the expense of like, there's, knuckleheads, running around on campus or showing up in the newspaper or something like that. So how do you find out that you have somebody who is somebody you can have a tough day with?
Yeah, and I always go back to this, and I tell our guys this: like, you can have talent, you can have work ethic, but if you don't have character, the first two don't matter. And that's not my quote. I got it from maybe Warren Buffett or somebody, but I love it. And those things matter, like the character part. And I ask tough questions of high school coaches. I observe a lot with the parents. If I recruit a bad kid into the program, that's my fault. And Brian doesn't win. He's going to let me know that. And it becomes a problem for him and me, and I don't need any problems. He doesn't need any problems. So I try to eliminate that. But we do a lot. We check social media. We check, with their guidance counselors. I check with the history teacher. I'm going to ask people in the building when I'm at a high school game, what do you think of something? Those things matter, because you can recruit your way or hire your way in a business into a problem. Yeah. And, you can't always be super choosy, but you really I'd rather find somebody that's a really good person that we can develop than somebody that thinks they know it all, or they're going to have character issues. They'll kill you. Character will kill you.
Yep. Yep. And so it sounds like you put in it's not just, hey, here's his magic question. It's just checking from all sorts of different angles about the person, not just the player, if I'm understanding. Not just the skills, it's the character.
Yeah. And the longer you coach and the longer you probably manage an organization, and Brian tell you, if he hires a bad coach or somebody that's going to get him in trouble, you can't do it. They just make your day difficult, whether you're running a business or, athletic department.
Yeah, they can ruin everything. That's for sure. So both of you have been leaders again for 3 decades. Brian, you've been a leader for longer than that. Brian, can you take this first? I'm curious, how have each of you changed over time as leaders, and then also what's really remained the same from your perspective from a leadership standpoint? I'm sure you can't give an exhaustive list, but what's your top of mind answer? How have you changed as a leader, and what's really been the core that stayed the same?
I've become more patient, more understanding. So I do try to listen more, try to observe more, try not to be quick to make a decision. That's probably for myself, is really still be able to fight the battle, but know what fight to have. So I used to probably fight everything. Now I know when to fight and when not to fight. And over the time, what's happened over the last 30, 40 years, the passion for the sport, our coaches that were coaching for us have a passion for their sport. A lot of people that want to be in this business, but they don't understand the business. It's not easy to be a coach. It's very difficult to be a coach nowadays, because the coaches are constantly, they're scrutinizing themselves. Our good coaches look at themselves in the mirror and question what they do. Coach Niland's quit so many times on me, it's not funny. It's like he goes, "You got to fire me." Like, coach, he's not the one making the shot. He's not the one not boxing out. But you look at your coaches; they got to have a passion for what they're doing, and they do. They're going to be successful, and they're going to work hard at it. And the coaches got to work hard. And that's from my standpoint. I just have to make sure coaches I have are going to work hard at what they're doing and not come up with excuses. And if you come up with excuses, we don't give up on them. I've had many coaches here that have struggled over the years, but we've worked with them, try to give them another year, try to find out, hey, you're going to have to make some adjustments. Let's try to make these adjustments. Still may not be successful record-wise, but they did some things themselves to make them feel better. So you stay with them. And again, fortunately, a lot of our coaches have won here, But we've had a few coaches that have lost a lot during the time that they were here, but it wasn't because they weren't working. They were working hard at their job. They just happened to be in a certain sport that may have been more of a challenge. Our water polo program is a good example where coach used to bust his hump trying to do things, but just the competition he went up against, you're just going to come up shorthanded. But you stay with them and be positive. I think you got to be there. I'd hate to be that AD that walked away on the guy that was going to fire. I mean, if I'm going to dismiss someone, I'm going to talk to him face to face, talk about why, and try to be there. They may not like me in the end, but hopefully they'll respect that. And I always encourage our coaches, if they want to look for a job, please let me know and let us help you. We've all got young assistants on our campus. All our young assistants are future coaches, which means they're future recruiters for us too. If they go someplace else, they're going to see some athlete that they can't recruit that they may call Dave up and say, hey, I've got an engineering student or I've got a business student you might want to look at. He's not going to fit into our program. So I think your networking never stops. And for me, I started back in 1975 at Ithaca College. And from that day, I still have friends from 1975. I have students I taught at Ithaca College that are athletic directors at UMass, coaching down at Drexel. And I think of guys like that I had in class that have gone on, that you just look at the people you've been around. If you get around good people, good things happen. And I'm lucky here. I'm around good people here.
It's interesting you say that, because you guys don't know our association, the RSPA, but people ask us, like, what is your best recruiting avenue? Like, is it going to shows? Is it lists? Is it sales pitches? And it's like, it's actually when somebody who's been in the community goes to a different organization who's not part of our community, one of the first things they do is they're like, I want to stay part of that community because of the good experience that they had. So, Coach Niland, same question for you. How have you changed as a leader, and then what are some things that haven't been, that have been remained the same for you over almost 30 years?
Sure. Yeah, I think, Jim, one of the things that I think as Brian kind of hit on, I think the longer you do something, you see situations more and more. I'm probably controlling my emotions much more than I used to. Obviously, in a very emotional setting, a lot of times. It's one thing I've changed a little bit with is that with my team, we'll do brief meetings, but I don't meet a lot with my team. I don't ever talk to them after a game. We'll briefly, I'll just say, hey, we got practice tomorrow at 3. We're done. Quick huddle, we're out. Too emotional. They're not ready to listen, and I'm probably too upset or whatever. If I'm having an issue, I used to before, sometimes if I was upset, I'd take it out on the team if I was mad at one guy, or so I was having an issue. And now I usually just bring that person in. Kids are a little different nowadays. I bring them in. And sometimes if I'm just trying to send a message to the team, I call them 1-minute meetings. I have a meeting without having a meeting where I grab the kid literally for 2 minutes and say, this is what I need out of you. That's it. And then we're trying to drive the message to everybody else. If I'm having an issue with somebody and it's an individual thing, I don't make it a team thing. I think that's really destructive. I've learned that the hard way, where I've hammered my team for over 1 or 2 guys. Not good. And if you're having trouble with an employee or something like that, the other employee doesn't want to hear it, right?
Yeah.
The guy that does everything right. So I've been better that way. It's helped a lot. I really don't want to be a coach-driven team. I want our team to be team-driven. And so we really work hard on that this is your team. I'm going to guide you. I'm going to give you boundaries, but it's your team. And if we can when you first start out in any organization, you're just building, but we've been able to get to that point where our culture is good enough where we get leadership from within without going too far into it.
Right. And that goes back to your turnover point. You can't, if you're, swapping out players every 2 years, you're never going to be able to build up that internal leadership.
You'll never be team driven. And that's what's happening in college athletics right now. It's all transactional, which is very difficult for young people to handle. They're not pros, and Brian and I got into this because it's transformational. Just like when you were coaching at Sacred Heart. It's the same, right, Jim? It's the same.
Yeah.
Whether you're managing people or players or young people, you're trying to make an impact. And most people got into this beat educators at the highest level now. It's anything but that, which is sad.
Next, I was going to say you're the first guest on this podcast to know that I coach at Sacred Heart, but that wouldn't be accurate because somebody who, long story short, Mike Monticello, who a lot of our members know, he's actually an Erie guy. I coached his younger brother. He was on that same team that I mentioned with Tommy Reisweber and Juwan Walker and all them. So, Coach, I do have to ask a follow-up question. So Do you explain, I'm guessing that there's no post-game conversation for a lot of your newer players. They probably are wondering, like, why does he do that? Is he even so angry at us he can't talk to us? Do you explain that to them up front? Do you give the why behind your actions to your players?
Usually I let the older guys handle it. I might walk out and the guys might, what the heck? But the older guys, they'll handle it. I mean, obviously your first year players, you're going to groom them all the way through that first month or so. Like, this is how we do things. And that's just how it is. And like, even with film, it's so different now, Jim. I can send them film than when you had to sit and watch it with the whole team.
Yeah.
I can get my point across in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
With a guy, and or just whatever. So yeah, sometimes you have to say, hey, this is why we do it, but it's very brief. It's very brief because their attention spans are very brief. It's a different generation.
When I coached youth soccer, I went to a clinic it was a coaching clinic for EYSA that Coach Peritano hosted. And the first thing that he said was to the coaches who were there, how'd you learn? You guys know how to throw a football? Yeah. How'd you learn to throw a football? And they're like, well, we went outside and started throwing a football. And he said, yeah, nobody lectured you on throwing a football. Give your kids the opportunity to play, to do something, and then teach based on them doing things. Don't just be blah, blah, blahing the whole way through. So true in the business world as well. So I have a question about families. And I want to have Coach Niland, if you could take this question first, because many of our members, they run family businesses. And so I know you coached your sons, Andy and Matt, at Behrend. And so can you talk about those dynamics? Like, how did you manage that? What lessons did you learn that could translate into guidance for family businesses about somebody on your team? You want to treat them equally, but obviously they're special, different. The players know that. Can you talk about those family dynamics?
Yeah, I thought it would be easier than it was. And I was a delight. I was blessed to have both of them with me. I missed a lot of their high school stuff. I think, Jim, when you're working with a family member, employee, whatever, I think what I learned was you have to have boundaries. You can't bring anything home or to the dinner table. And my boys lived off campus away from our house, but they're home. I didn't talk with my wife about any of that team stuff. It wasn't fair. She shouldn't have access that the other parents didn't have. But boundaries. And I also really felt like before they joined us that their interest and passion, whether it's coming into a team or a business, is that what they really want to do? Don't do it because I wanted to. That never works. And whether, I wanted to, do you want to come here? Do you want to play here? Do you want to work here? Do you want to be part of the family business? Because that person's interest and passion is somewhere else. You're never going to get the most out of them. And so I was really keen on that. But I think with when there was issues, if there was issues within the organization or our team, for the example, it's harder on them because they're the one dealing with the locker room. And I kind of didn't pick up on that right away.
Yeah.
And they never really brought that to me. They were good leaders within what we were doing. But I think you got to have boundaries, and then you have to find out what the family member's true interest is. And then obviously when you're dealing with multiple people and the hierarchy of who's in charge and everything and the jealousies and things, you got to be careful with that. But from a team standpoint, boundaries. And then, do you want to do this? What's your level of passion? Because it's going to be harder than the normal player.
Yes.
And it's funny, when they shot a shot, I never thought of them as my son. I never really thought of them as my sons when I coached them, ever. And I probably was harder on them because of the position they played than most other players. And Brian probably saw it. I was tough on my kids.
Dave was great
because they could handle it.
He was great with his boys. Unbelievable, really. Both having two sons played, being a point guard position, running the show. If they threw the ball out of bounds, he'd have them over the bench quick. No different. I never saw him treat them either any way different than anybody else on the team. And that was a credit to him. And his kids responded like every other ball player. They're a ball player. They're part of the team. They didn't ask for anything special. I mean, I never one time felt over the 8 years that he coached his kids ever did the boys ask for something special. They were just proud to be on a basketball team with their buddies and just happened to be their dad's coaching them, but they didn't treat it as dad. It was coach. It was special to watch happen. You don't normally. It's one thing to see a coach their sons for 4 years, but to have a young man coach both sons for 8 years in a row, just terrific. I mean, and they're two different type of athletes. And Matt, Matt's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Andy's completely different, but on the court, as individuals, basketball players, they're true leaders. And a lot of leadership came from Dave. They saw Dave coach over the years. They grew up in the household that he had. and they took that leadership to the court, and the players respected them. That was the best thing. Players on the team respected those two young men for the leadership skills they brought to the team, not because their dad was the coach. They, these guys weren't friends of the players because their dad was the coach.
Yeah,
Just really unique to see. It was fortunate. We'll miss that next year. We'll miss it. Dave won't have that opportunity to have his kids there. It'll miss all of us. We just like watching them play and watching them coach them. Because it's great.
And well said that, like you said, Coach, you have to set those boundaries. And Brian, you said, like, you have to be intentional with how you run the organization, because naturally it's not going to work that way. You have to have those boundaries. And Brian, you technically don't have family, who you are supervising, but you have several coaches we talked about who've been there 10, 20, 30 years. There's no way that you can be that close to somebody for that long and, not be friends with them. So how do you balance that combination of the friendship and then respecting their years of wisdom, and then guiding them to get better? How do you make all that work?
That's probably been the hardest thing for me. At times I feel like I have no friends, believe it or not. Yes, I've got coaches on the staff and I try to be there, but I've tried to make sure I don't allow any one of them to be any closer, any further. If as I get to the end of my career, you wonder who you're going to hang out with. You don't know if you've got friends you go back and watch. I think I do. I think I can come back at any time, but you don't have that opportunity in the administrative role as you would as a coach. I think of my assistant coaches, I had great friends, past assistant coaches. But here you're in a different role. You want to be friends with them. I think they know I'm there for them. I'll always be there for our coaches and be there to support them. And that's what I think my role has to be. And that's about as close as you really can get, because at times there's something going to come up that they'll need. I'll have to make some discipline rules. But I think we have open communication enough that we feel comfortable with each other. If Dave's got a problem, he'll bring it to me. If I have a problem, I've taken more to him and I've learned a lot through him. Believe it or not, I've learned an awful lot on how to handle people by talking to Coach Niland and working with Coach Niland because of the 28 years he's had in experience, and Coach Benham 32 years in experience, and Paratano 30 years. And you learn from each other. Sometimes you don't have to say a whole lot, but just observe. You can learn a lot by watching.
Brian, can you draw the distinction in terms of, just because you can't be friends with the people that you supervise, but you can care about them deeply? Can you talk about like those two? It's almost like conflicting thoughts. Can you share how you view that?
They're an extension of the family. I feel comfortable, and I've got to be that way. I spend more time here than I do my own family, and that's the tough part. But when I chose to be in this position, I chose that's how you should run an athletic department. You need to be around your coaches. You need to be there be at their games. I don't miss too many home games, and I try to catch some road games. My family questioned me, "Why are you there? Why are you doing all this? Why are you still doing this? You should have retired 3 years ago." You do it because you love it. I absolutely do, and would do anything for the guys that we have. Here at the college, we'll go through some tough times, but we're going to manage whatever we go through. We're going to manage as a group, and we're going to get through it, and we're going to be successful. And it doesn't have to be you're winning and losing. That's not the success. Success is seeing kids learning and playing, and coaches learning and teaching. And as long as that happens, in the end, the kids are going to graduate and have a degree and move on. And it's great when they're winning. It's easy to have fun when you're winning, but when you have those couple games, Coach Niland's been fortunate. Dave's been winning every year he's been here, but 1 year, and the 1 year was a tough year. He beat himself up throughout the year because he wanted to be better. He wanted more for his kids. It wasn't that he needed to have 20-win season. He wanted more for his athletes, and you can see that. You can see the passion that he had, and our other coaches do the same thing. When some of our coaches go down, Paul Benham's had good seasons, but when he's down in a down year, they're not down on themselves. They feel bad for their athletes. They try to find ways to help their athletes get over the hump, make that last free throw, or get the box out. Whatever little thing happens, or the poor officiating call, you got to live with it. You got to move on from it. And our coaches have learned to do that. It's been fun to be a part of that.
I was going to say, Coach Niland didn't need those extra wins to build up his resume. He probably didn't have a resume, right? Because not going and looking for other jobs to do that. So we're going to take a quick break here and thank our sponsors who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsor is Blue Star. Our gold sponsors are CoCard, Epson, Heartland, and ScanSource. So you both attend other games, you scout games, you see other coaches and observe other leaders. So Coach Niland, I'm seeing if you can start with this first. What are the biggest mistakes that you see other coaches making in terms of leading their teams? I know one you mentioned before is you controlling your emotions. That's a big one that I see. They flipping out all the time on people and expecting performance. What's the biggest mistake that you see?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it's just emotions, Jim. Controlling. When you're leading people, especially young people, if you're not in control, they will not be in control. And a lot of times, the pressure of lack of handling pressure comes from not being prepared. So sometimes, if the coach isn't prepared, they don't handle it. I think if you're prepared, you're going to be able to function and let the chips fall where they may. If you're not prepared, there's always that extra stress level. And I think sometimes that happens, I think, with coaches where they lose it and it's never going to end well. And as me individually, I don't judge other coaches. I don't know everybody's situation, but you go to high school games and you see it and stuff like that. You got to understand that, you're representing an organization, whether it's a business or a university. You cannot act in a way that is going to hurt your career or others.
Yeah, and hurt the brand, the reputation of the
Absolutely.
college. Brian, what's the biggest mistake you see other coaches making in terms of leading their teams?
Yeah, the discipline that they don't have. The coaches that don't have discipline that shows up real quick in a ball game, and they get carried away screaming at officials, and they're not focusing on their players. And administratively, when I look at administrators that work at what they're doing, their programs are successful. Those that don't work, they stay at the bottom of the pack every year, and they always have excuses. There's a lot of things that you can have excuses for, but there's things you got to control to give your coaches a chance to be successful. And fellow administrators that I see that do struggle are they're more worried about themselves. What can I do? It's not about an I. There's no I in team, right? And when you see people doing the things for themselves, it's all about ego. Nobody cares that I'm in this position. Hopefully my coaches care I'm one of their leaders, but I'll move on. Somebody else will step in here. But if it's about that person, not going to work. It's got to be about the school. Everything I do represents Penn State-Behrend, and we try to present Behrend as much as we can. It's a great institution, a great Division III school. We'd like more facilities. Yes, we'd like more of this and that. But what we have, we cherish what we have, and we try to be supportive to our coaches and athletes with what we have.
Yeah, just when anybody brings up excuses, this goes back to my playing days. So Bob Duquette, who was my coach the last 3 years when I was at Gannon, he wrote on the marker board, and it never got erased for his entire tenure at Gannon, and it just said in all caps, "No excuses." And then, it was actually "Excuses are for dogs." And he was from New Jersey, so it was always dogs. Excuses are for dogs. And so anytime I hear somebody with an excuse, I think of Coach Duquette saying excuses are for dogs, and he never wanted to hear excuses from us. It was all about getting better for sure. So let's talk about a learning experience from maybe early in your careers that was hugely impactful for you as a leader. And Brian, if you want to go first, is there a story or a situation that taught you something that guides you even today? Maybe a coach who put "excuses are for dogs" on his marker board.
I learned a lot. I used to oversee our assistant coaches at Hobart, which were all grad assistants, and learned a lot from them, how immature they can be. I try to work with our grad assistants that we have here, our assistant coaches now here, and just constantly remind them who they're representing. It's not about you. You're on our staff, and you need to have guys that you go out and they get wasted trying to drink all the time. Like, that's not what we want. We don't need that part of our program. You go out and have a good time. That's one thing. When you go out and you're representing the school and you're out in the community, people know you. People are going to know who you are. And I've always believed that if one of our coaches got picked up for DWI, it affects all of us. We all get thrown into that. So I think just making people, I learned from being around those assistant coaches that your reputation as a school and a program depends on how you present yourself, and just try to always carry that forward. And with our young assistants we have here, I try to remind them, everything you do, someone's watching you. And a lot of times everything you do, people are jealous that you're in that position. Everybody likes to be a coach. They don't want to do the work to be a coach, but they like to be in that role on the sideline. They like to be at the game. But you work too hard to have your reputation ruined on one simple mistake.
Well said. Coach Niland, learning experience you want to share?
Yeah, it wasn't a good one. I had a really bad incident I think it was my second year here. I lost my cool in the game in a hallway, and I took it out on the team. News reporter was outside the locker room. He reported what I had said to the team, and for whatever reason, I didn't speak with him after the game. I didn't realize he was there. I didn't know he was there. So he said I didn't want to talk to him, but I went into my office area and I really lost my cool and I was upset. And it was before Brian was the AD. Brian was still coaching at Hobart. Herb Laufer, who was the best, who hired me, was just a tremendous gentleman. I just didn't present myself well in front of him, and there was an alumni there that was a big supporter of ours who I didn't realize was there, and I just made a scene. I was really upset. The next day, our president called me. Mr. Laufer met with me and said, "This can never happen again." And then it got in the paper that I blew up on my team, and I embarrassed myself, my school, my family. I said, "That's never going to happen again." And I really, really learned the hard way from that. And I had apologized to the alumnus that was a great donor of ours. And, I may have lost that person. I don't know. It was a bad moment for me as a 27 or 28-year-old coach. If I would have happened at a higher level, I may have lost my job.
Yeah. So that was like 1996 that you're going back to. Like, you're going back almost 30 years. Like, how is that stuck with you for so long? Because a lot of people are like, well, that's old news. Like, things are different. Why has that stuck with you for so long?
Thank you, Jim. As you know, coaches, we remember everything, and you know what I said, you remember stuff that probably stays with you, the bad stuff. Unfortunately, I don't remember many wins, to be honest with you. I tell you a lot about our losses. Yeah. I feel like I've had a hand in them. I didn't win a game, but I've lost a lot here. Players win them. But that situation really stuck with me. And I think if you're in an organization or business and you have a moment like that in front of people, you gotta bounce back from it. Fortunately, Mr. Laufer was really patient with me. And really, he passed away in the middle of our academic year. And we hit the lottery when we hired Brian, because he's very similar to Coach Laufer. And he kind of just kept this thing going, actually grew it, and changed the whole trajectory of it, and handled a lot of situations with coaches, and still probably me at times. He talked me off a ledge, but just, we got very lucky, and I was very fortunate. But yeah, it was not good.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. We appreciate it. Brian,
the funny part is Coach Niland was a great football player and a great basketball player. And when I was at Hobart, he wouldn't come play for me.
I couldn't.
I was secondary, and football coach really wanted to be the quarterback, and I was just tagging along, trying to say he can play basketball for us too, But the funny thing is, when I took this job here, when I came to interview for the job on this day, Coach Niland was interviewing at Lemoyne that day. When you think back there, David, people were reaching out to him to take different jobs. And I thought for sure, I don't want to lose this great coach, young coach at the time, but had already made him a good mark on the profession. And Dave's a leader. He's a leader in the program. He's a Division III coach, one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in the country. And that's the thing that people don't realize. We're fortunate to have some great people here, but Dave's a role model for our other coaches. Our coaches can learn a lot from him. And that's the thing I think is important. They speak up when they need to speak up to tell people how to do things right and wrong. And our coaches aren't afraid to help one another. I think that's the important part.
Yeah.
We've separated ourselves. We're in Erie Hall now, and we're in the Junker Center. So our coaches have separated in two buildings. I don't like it because they're not all together.
Right.
And we got to figure out a way to bring them back in a little bit more. But it's just important. You've got to have a strong staff to be able to work well with each other. And if someone's down, if you're having a down year, be there to pull the coach up. And our coaches do a nice job supporting each other, whether good or bad seasons.
Yeah, and you mentioned role model. And so, Brian, can you talk about who are some leaders that you've looked up to as mentors and have shaped your leadership approach? And what did they say? What did they do that's had a lasting impact on you?
All the coaches that I've worked with in the role I've been, and all the administrators I've worked with, have all been role models in different ways. I was fortunate here. I worked with, John Lilly hired me. And a lot of people didn't care for the way John managed things, but I loved what he did. He gave me a chance to believe in myself. He believed in me. Then Jack Burke took over after him. We were just fortunate. We've had some great leaders here. Jack Burke, then John Burke, and then now currently Ralph Ford. We're talking about some people that are committed to an institution, committed to the staff, coaches, and the students. And we're fortunate they're committed to our student athletes. They understand the value our student athletes bring. Our student athletes are the best students on this campus. They have the highest GPA on this campus. And our presidents and chancellors have cherished that, knowing that we are bringing quality student athletes here. We've got quality coaches that can manage those students. So those are the people for me. The people I've worked with have really been my role models. I'd put myself, you put yourself around good, strong people, makes you look better. Well, I don't have to look better, but I like to be around good people that helps me do my job better. And that's all I want to do. When I leave at the end of the day, I hope I did something good for somebody. I learn every day. Every day
Yeah.
I'm learning something. There's never a day that I don't walk out of here and say, geez, I didn't know that. Not afraid to learn. I'll learn until I get out of this business, and I'll keep learning thereafter. I don't want to retire. I don't have any interest in retiring. I just love it. I mean, it's crazy. It's so crazy
that ties in with what you just said. It sounds like you really learned commitment to the institution from the current and past presidents. Is that what you took away, what you've taken away from them?
Yep. And I loved Hobart. Believe me, my time at Hobart, stepping away from coaching was probably the craziest thing for me. What I do that for? But if there was the right time at the right place to do that, and came to a place that was this, when I came here, it was the right move to the right school at the time. And we were able to grow for the years, field wise, sports wise. And we had 10 sports when I started. So we were able to grow the campus the right way. And it's just been a great movement, a great opportunity. But yeah, you love what you do. You got to love what you do, especially in being in the coaching world. Got to have a passion. And I've got to be there for our coaches. If somebody's struggling, I want to be there for them. When a coach loses, our two teams were in the NCAA tournament last week. They had 2 tough losses on the second day. Got to be there for them, just to let them know we care. You had a great season. It's just a game. It's just a game we're playing. But you worked hard for your kids, and you gave your kids an opportunity that everybody else in the league didn't have. That's all it's about.
That's right. Coach Niland, who are some leaders, some mentors who've helped you and you've looked up to?
Well, I mean, I mentioned Herb Bloffer, who hired me. He was a tremendous influence my first couple of years, just because you're so young, you need to be around good people. That's huge. When you got a young employee, and I was a young employee, and we had a young coaching staff, you got to be around good administrators and good people. And Dr. Roger Sweeting, who Brian and I are close with, tremendous influence on me those first couple of years as an educator. He taught here, and he was great as a connector and just both great role models. And again, Brian coming in, and Brian and I been very close, and he's been a great mentor to me. He's really helped me through a lot of situations that I may have done differently, and he was great with that. And I still rely on him to this day about, hey, how do we handle this? Because he always looks at things differently in a way that I don't, which is good. And it's always going to come to a positive ending typically, but we talk things through. And then probably as a younger person, someone, Coach Beeline, when you're 18 to 22, people you were around are huge. And he was someone that just dealt with the truth every day, whether you liked it or not. You were dealing with the truth, and he would tell you things as a young person that you needed to hear, that you didn't want to hear. And he was always respectful, and he was demanding without being demeaning. But I still stay in touch with him and talk with him quite a bit because of just the respect I had for him. And, when you're that age and you have good older people around you, that was huge for me, because it's just very difficult when you're that young as an athlete or a coach to you get in the wrong environment, your career can end really quick.
Yeah, and what were the qualities? Thank you for that. The qualities you learned from Coach Beeline. You mentioned respectfulness because, again, Lemoyne was in Gannon's league. Gannon fans were loud and behaved in a not very Catholic manner in terms of yelling at other coaches and things like that. But they hated almost all the other coaches. But everybody really respected Beeline, even though he probably had more success than anybody at Gannon. Winning in a very difficult place to. What did you learn from him? What example did he set for you back then when you were And again, I know you've known him longer than that. So can you talk about that?
Well, yeah, he worked really hard, Jim. As a leader, we knew we were always prepared. So you had a lot of confidence in him. Similar to Brian. Brian works harder than anybody in our department. He just does. He's never going to, so he worked really hard. We were always prepared. There was boundaries. We had expectations of how to behave, how to act, how we, reacted to other people. And again, trying to help people grow up, right? You're trying to help young men grow up. You got to control them a little bit. He was just, and he was a great role model. He would tell you what you needed to hear. He sometimes didn't use a lot of words, it was the way he acted. Super competitive, wanted to win, but we prepared. And then I think the culture at Lemoyne helped too, a little bit too, that shaped him. He was young at the time. Yeah. There was a really good culture there. So it's just kind of really just, his words and actions more than anything. And employees observe that, right? So if you're a good leader and you're honest, and sometimes, like Brian said, you're going to have to tell people things they don't want to hear, but to move forward, they have to hear them. As long as you do it in a respectful way and you care, you're going to get some production.
Yeah, there's a quote that's attributed to Coach Beeline. It's not for public consumption, I don't believe, but Lenny Roush, who, Brian, I don't know if you ever heard of Lenny Roush, but I know Dave, that you knew him. So he was a very good player at Lemoyne, but he was difficult to manage. Is that kind of say, Dave? Like he was a difficult player to manage? And somebody asked Coach Beeline after Roush had graduated, "Oh, no Lenny Roush. What's that going to feel? What does that feel like for you?" And he said, "Imagine if you had a hammer and hit yourself in the head for 4 straight years and put it down. It feels like that." And so I don't know if that quote is true or not, but I'm like, well, that's a pretty good one. And I bet he arm wrestled with him for years to keep him on the straight and narrow. So I don't know if there's anything you can add to that.
Well, no, tremendous talent. And it's like anything. He was a tremendous talent. Brian remembers him because Brian was coaching. He's a tremendous talent. And when you have really talented people that are good and Jenny wanted to be good, Lenny wanted to win, his competitiveness was just through the roof. So if you have like an employee that's talented or headstrong, but they're good, you got to keep them. They're going to produce. And I think that's where, it was a situation with coaches, like as good as he was talented. It's no different than when you see in pro sports now. Like you got to be able to manage your best player in some way, unless there comes a point you can't manage him anyway. But you got to try to make things work. And even now, I have some really good players that might be headstrong. You got to find a way to make that work. And if they go outside of what your organizational boundaries are, then it matters. But yeah, when you're working with talented people, there's a reason they're talented or they're successful. They're going to probably have expectations and things that don't always match up with you. And that's a thing. It's a hard thing to do. It's, it's not always easy to coach, a really, really talented person or manage a really, really smart person, right? It's just you got to value them, but you got to be able to manage them. It's not always easy.
No, sometimes that could be the most difficult of all. So, all right, so we're almost out of time. And so just so all our listeners know, I always send the questions in advance to the folks who are going to appear on the show. But the one that I'm going to close with, you guys don't have this yet. I'm actually quoting the the February 1997 edition of Sportsbook that I showed earlier. Coach, it's when I interviewed you. My question was, how long do you plan on staying at Behrend? And your answer was, I like it here a great deal. I enjoy what I'm doing and the people I'm working with. I hope the feeling's mutual. You never know. So Brian, that was, again, 1997. It's 27 years later. Do we know now in terms of if the feeling's mutual in terms of folks liking Dave and working with him as a leader?
They definitely do. We're fortunate that, again, Dave's a role model for all of us. And that's been the best part is that, he does his job. He loves his job. And, he's focused on what he needs to do. And that's the best part. He doesn't interfere, doesn't want to get, there's all the other crap that goes on campuses, deals with what he needs to deal with. And that's great. And we don't want to see him leave. We don't want to see him leave, at least not till I'm gone.
Well, again, he said you never know back in 1997. So we should be in good shape. Coach Niland, I'll give you the final word. Anything you'd want to share, last words on leadership with our audience?
Other than, it's hard to kind of describe. You just have to work at it. I think you got to be honest. You're going to make mistakes. Care about the people you work with and try to understand what they're going through on a day-to-day basis. And that is a big thing. It's so easy to say, but just showing that they care like Brian does and showing interest in them and be an example of hard work. I think you'll get to where you want to be. But that's what, to me, leadership comes in a lot of different forms. I don't really think about it every day. You just do it. But, just caring about other people and taking an interest in them and never really making it about you, you'll probably go a long way. And kind of more being a servant leader, it's a term used a lot, but it's pretty much what's going to make you satisfied as well.
Jim, as a leader, you can't be afraid to make mistakes. In coaching, right? Coaching, when you coach, you've got people you play at times, you're going to make mistakes, but you got to be able to stand behind what you're doing and believe in what you're doing. And I think that's important. You got to believe in yourself, but not be afraid to make mistakes and learn from them. Let's definitely learn from them.
Amen. Well said. Well, that does it for this episode of The Trusted Advisor. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. Before we go, big thanks again to Brian Streeter and Dave Niland for sharing their wisdom with us today and also helping me walk down memory lane. Also, thanks to RSPA Marketing Director Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail technology ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening and goodbye, everybody.